I don't think we can really help when our parents get a little bit older. We can't help but worry about them. We envision the worst things happening sometimes. We're like, oh, no, no, I hope that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does.
So the more prepared you can be, hopefully the easier that will be
Exactly.
if something does happen. Today, we're going to talk to Beth Rowan of Evergreen Ally. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
When we think about preparedness and in case of an emergency, where should we start?
We should start with actually knowing what the benefit of an emergency preparedness plan is. And that really is to give you the calm, the control, and the choices that people find they don't have after enduring a crisis. Mm-hmm. I started my company, Evergreen Ally, after helping my parents rebuild their lives when their home was destroyed by a fire. So I intimately know the complexities of actually recovering, and also how to endure the emotional, the physical, and the financial loss that crisis actually give us.
Mm-hmm. So when we're thinking of an emergency, are we typically thinking of a fire or something like that happening to your home?
It could be, but there are many different emergencies, and that's the first step really, is to evaluate what am I at risk at? And that can be a home disaster, depending on where you live, if that's weather. It can be medical, if you have situations in your family where people are at risk, they have a dangerous job, like teachers, right? Who would have thought that teachers would become a dangerous job? At medical, if you have special needs in your home. So different things that happen to different people. And that's why I start with that as the first step, because again, sometimes the mass information we see out there doesn't seem relative, right? Like my parents lived in California. So people in New York might not think wildfire. Okay. Like I'm not worried about that. But we all live in big buildings that if our neighbor's apartment is on fire, right, I'm at risk. If there's a restaurant downstairs, I mean, Texas didn't think that they would have a freeze, a storm, right? So we all have different things. And that's really the first step, to think about what am I most at risk for.
Yeah, we always talk about planning, and when Kim and I have speeches about our group, we always talk about, talk to your parents about housing, about financial stuff, about legal stuff. But talking about being ready for those disasters, it's something that you have to do. You have to be ready for it.
Right. We all heard the fight or flight, right? Like our body and our brain's reaction to like a danger. But it's really the last one, the freeze. Most people just freeze when something happens. I mean, we all hear the articles after a flood. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. Or even, notices. They didn't know, like, should I be listening to Facebook? Like I heard my neighbor say this. So it really is about our brain freezes us instead of reacting. And so, yes, a plan not only gives you the time to calmly think about situations, the focus really is the goal. What do I want to come out of this? And that's where I think the goal, starting there, is really important when you're helping your parents, because right away, it's uncomfortable. Parents don't want to be a burden. They don't like the idea of asking for help. So when you talk about this is to give you the most comfort in your recovery, and it gives you control over your outcome, that's where people tend to then say, oh, okay, yeah, now I don't want this to happen. I want to be like this.
I think that most people have the tendency to think that they hear this and think, oh yeah, I should get a plan. That sounds like a great idea. Right. And then yet think, I'll worry about that later. So how do you get them to actually take action?
Sure. So really thinking about what you have at risk, but what is a risk to you is usually addresses what you're most afraid of. And then also financially, what is the biggest damage to you? And again, the damage could be also physically. So when you start with those, that really helps you think about like one at a time, and it keeps the overwhelm from like all the 42 things that I have to do. With your parents, it is usually about like the child, the family, right, wants them to be well. And then you want to think the next step after your physical safety is, where are you going to go? How long is it going to take to recover? And what are the things that I need to do. So that's the actual nuts and bolts of whether it's a medical claim or an insurance claim, all the tasks that seem to overwhelm people. That's where you get your support network to help you out.
Suggestions for what we do with our aging parents if they have the attitude, oh, that'll never happen to me, I don't have to worry about that.
Right. Well, a lot of it is their comfort. So I'm sure you've already talked to your community about like medications. It's amazing how many personal things that we don't share, where really the benefit of sharing it is just so that you can help me out, right, when I'm sick. So medications, listing the medications, everyone should know medications and who your key doctor is. Definitely the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy, because this is really the healthcare proxy and the will, like your executor. People often think like, oh, it's the person I'm closest to. And often remember, it's about these people are going to be affecting your wishes. They're going to be fighting for you and what you want, not what they want. So it really is a good time to evaluate who you feel you can trust that's going to be strong enough to put your parents' wishes first. So all those like documents, and I'm sure you've gone over it, but it's also to communicate who it is. So besides just telling your one child, this is my healthcare proxy, it's a good thing to communicate to everybody else so that, again, that person has the freedom to really just concentrate on your wishes. A support network, and this is really for the families that are caring for people, are who are the people you know you can call to help you out in different areas. For instance, if someone's ill and they're recovering, having people bring you meals, and just know that you could call up and say, you know what, today was nuts. Like, is there something that you can drop off? People that you don't have to go into, well, what do you want? And all the choices. It's about you decide what that is. And that's even taking people on outings. It's also an emotional break. What I found in helping my parents recover, we're used to being bombarded with information. So people on Facebook, people, are on all these social medias, but it's not accurate information and it's really not helpful. So we all need an emotional outlet. So who is the person that you have that you can just say, you know what, I had a really crappy day. I don't need answers. I don't need suggestions. I just need you to listen to me. And it's amazing how often we forget our own self-care to be able to vent and not have someone come back and say like, wow, like, are you really thinking, that this is a good idea? It's just, we're all human. Another thing is physical, where your parents are living, because we tend to not think anything's going to happen to my home. And so home safety, includes fire safety, but it also includes the things like slip and fall. How do you get out of your building or your home if something happens? Like, again, it's talking about what could happen and what your action is going to be. Going back to what you said, Mike, is like, we kind of like freeze and don't know what to do. Is if my neighbor's house goes on fire, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? If I'm really not feeling well, when am I going to feel comfortable calling someone? Because no one wants to call 911, like we all think they're so busy. But at the same point, what if you're not feeling well enough and you don't have that alert? Alerts. There are really good alerts when you've evaluated what your biggest risks are. If you are in an area where there's a problem, the FEMA alerts are good. Get real notifications so that you're not waiting for maybe an inaccurate source to like tell you what to do.
Well, and I think one of the things that we had talked about previously was when you were helping your parents, a lot of it was all of the stuff that was in their house. So how can you be prepared for chronicling all of that, or keeping track of that? Because that's an important component of this too, right?
Absolutely. Because when something happens and you get through the initial crisis, it's the recovery and the claim process that gets to overwhelm. People find out, oh, I didn't know that. So with your parents, a lot of it is talking with them, and it can just be through stories about like if your dad was in the military, there are pensions, there are a lot of things. And because we know of the products that are available today, it's hard to like imagine that, our parents and our grandparents had pensions, and they had all of these different details that you actually do need the paperwork because it's not online now. So I would definitely gather those together and dig them out and make sure they're accurate. So again, in a non-stress time, make phone calls, just make sure that you know what it is that you need, that your parents are entitled to, and how to go about claiming it. That's a big thing. When it's also, we talked about the home, right? Our personal home is what is of value. So often with our parents, it's talking to them what is emotional value versus what they think is a value that they're passing on. That's where a lot of things happen that, so if it's jewelry and art, everyone knows to get those appraised, but it really is coming down to things that are passed down. I would list them, definitely list them. And again, it's just on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be a really technical document, but you want to give comfort to your parents that it's taken care of, that they can see it, they can review it, that you know who they want it to go to. And also, when you start to gather that, you start to actually help the overwhelm of yourself of what's going to happen to everything. Again, during a really difficult time when someone's in passing, a lot of times people are like, just throw it away, I can't deal with it. Or they hold on to it and actually hoard it because they're frozen. They don't know what to do.
So could you actually just take your phone and literally just go through the house and talk about everything and point everything out, and that way you have it? Would that be a good way to keep track of whatever?
Have it on video.
Yeah, have it on video.
That's very helpful for two. One is, yes, for your parents to actually know that it's all taken care of and you're having conversation. It's also a good thing to have for everyone to have you too, for our insurance. If something does happen to your home and damage, because a list, which is detailed and has all the brands and all that kind of stuff, the pricing is helpful. But with insurance company, like once it's gone, someone's going to say like, it was a dresser, like who cares, and so the value of it becomes really difficult. Another thing with the documentation with your parents is to actually just put your eyes on it, because often if there were divorces, if someone's in passing, beneficiaries, you do want to get all that updated. It just becomes a lot longer, and it prevents things, depending on what state you live in, to have to go into probate if, depending on who they want. And again, I'm not an attorney, but what I would advise from working with attorneys is anything that you have financially or asset-wise that has a beneficiary, you listing it on that first is a quicker way, because it doesn't have to go through the will.
Sure. So
even though the will is listed, it's listed within the will, is you're not waiting for probate if your state has probate.
Yeah.
There's a lot to keep track of and a lot to remember, but can make such a huge difference in helping our parents and being able to manage all of the things.
Yeah. Plan and prepare. I guess that's the thing to remember.
And think about what's your priority. I mean, that's what I found is if financially you really want to make sure that you don't lose anything, then that's where you start with the big ticket items, the big ticket policies and things like that. If it is about like keeping a calm environment, especially if people need that kind of, then that's what you have to think about is physically where's that person going to go? What can I do? How can I help out? So really, if you think about how you want, what your recovery process is good for you, then that's really where it starts.
That's great. Plan, prayer, and prepare, and priority. So you got the 3 Ps. That's
great. So that
Beth,
you don't freeze and you know how to react.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks for the great tips, Beth. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's great.
It is so hard to think about all of those things and make sure that you just know all of it that you need to know about.
Yeah, unfortunately, the crises do happen. That you have to be ready for them. But if you plan and prepare and know your priorities, maybe you'll be ready for it. We invite you, if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss and talk to an expert about, let us know. Parenting Aging Parents.